hopefully, yeah, sort of maybe February, maybe March, maybe April next year, we'll get this show on the road.
Yeah, that didn't happen, and this is why. Turns out having a baby is not great for hitting any self-imposed deadlines. Who could have foreseen that?
You look awful.
So yeah, my game's release date has been pushed back somewhat, but I cannot solely blame my small baby human person for this. The other reason is strategic. So I was talking to Tom, who made Lucy Dreaming, about Next Fest, and he was saying, are you putting a demo into Next Fest? And I said, no, I want to make this game get out of my life now, please. And then we had a chat about it, and he said, did you know demos and Next Fest are very good for wish lists? And I had to think about it. I had to think about the stress of hitting a self-imposed deadline too soon, and I had a bit of a big rethink, really. Therefore, the game has a new release date. You may have seen I published a release date trailer on this channel. If you haven't, it's linked below. But yeah, July 22nd, which is a date more or less pulled out of nowhere, other than it's safely on the other side of the June Next Fest. So the way this is going to go now is that I'm going to release a demo just before Next Fest. Steam Next Fest will happen in early June. There'll be a month for people to play the demo and hopefully build up a little bit of steam.
Now that's a pun!
And I will do some marketing stuff, whatever that may be. And then the game will release in the back end of July, which is safely between the launch of the Switch 2 and the launch of GTA 6, my biggest rivals. But we need to take a little step back, I think, because before you even get into picking a release date, you need to get a game in a state that's kind of semi-finished, or can at least be finished before that release date, right? So in this episode, I'm going to talk about that whole process, specifically getting people to test my game and what happened, and ports, specifically iOS, because I didn't realise this, but that was a whole thing. Welcome back to the Point and Click Devlog, an ongoing series which probably only has about 3 more episodes left to go. So beta testing?
Beta
is a scary prospect because it involves handing out the thing that you've been working on by yourself for years to other people for them to find errors in and tell you what's wrong with it, which is kind of a vulnerable situation to put yourself in. So to that end, you're going to want to find people that you can trust, right? Because you don't want people who are just going to A, steal your game and run away with it, but B, do a good job. This isn't just playing a game for fun, it's digging into it, finding where the holes are and kind of seeing what breaks it. So to that end, I put out a call on our Discord server for this channel asking if anyone wanted to do it. I was lucky enough to get a bunch of people to say yes, and then ultimately settled on about 10 people who were willing to sign an NDA and not do anything silly, but also put in the hours that it took, which I'm very grateful for, because it's not something I'd want to do. It's like free labour.
You work for me now.
So yeah, I fired across a little non-disclosure agreement, but that was more of a symbolic thing than anything else, because it sort of said, if you're willing to sign this, then we trust each other, more than it was anything that I was going to legally chase people about. Got them on board, then went through the process of trying to set up a Steam playtest. So if you don't know about this, playtest is a relatively new feature within Steam that acts kind of like a demo in that it's a sub app within your main app, and it allows you to give access to either first come first serve a certain number of people, or specified people via keys to a version of your app that's kind of locked down, so they can only access it within Steam, and then once you decide that the playtest is over, you can just revoke all access. So if you do want to get into beta testing, I don't know, it's a great way to safely do so. So I set up my testers with a copy each and set up a big spreadsheet that kind of had a place to put bugs, observations on quality of life improvements, game playtime, general thoughts, and then with bugs like how severe they are, and I left them to it. And the birth of my small baby human child thing was really good as a distraction with this whole thing, because whereas otherwise I might be just incessantly staring at that spreadsheet waiting for people to say how bad my game is, I was having a baby, which meant I could just sort of get on with things for a few weeks with a great distraction. So the results of the playtest, nothing major, which is amazing. Like most people, no, everybody in fact managed to play it all the way through to the end without it breaking, which is kind of nothing short of a miracle, I think. Where there were common themes, it was around some bugs that were more like quality of life than anything else. So I had one bug where when you double click, the player would run, but he was getting caught on the nav mesh in various places, which I knew going in, because when I exported the build I saw that happen, but everyone was like, this is weird, and when he goes around corners he just sort of walks in place for a bit. Nav meshes are weird and hard to foolproof, but we talked about it and just decided that because most of the rooms in my game are pretty small, he doesn't really need to do any running. Like walking, it will be fine. Now maybe that's something that someone will ultimately give me a bad review for, because they can't just run to exits and speed up their playthrough.
So slow.
But on a balance of like game working versus breaking, I think that's a fine trade-off to make. The other big thing that everybody said had to do with the inventory. So with this build, you click on an inventory item, move the mouse outside of the inventory, and then click to close the inventory. And people found that extra click to be a bit of a pain in the arse.
I'm getting exhausted just thinking about it.
And in hindsight, I agree with them.
I am kind of tired.
So what I did was just make a new menu either side of the safe space in the inventory, which when you mouse over, just closes the inventory. So now when you drag something out anywhere outside of the inventory, it closes itself. Other than a couple of weird other bugs to do with like saving and loading states and things, there was nothing major. But what this did show me is that testing is a funny beast, because whilst on the surface you're saying, you know, does this game have any bugs and what are the quality of life things that you'd like me to improve, there is also a tendency for people to want to kind of dive into a bit of creative direction and say, I wouldn't do it this way, I would do it this way, or I would present this slightly differently, or this setup and payoff is not to my liking, or whatever. And that becomes a bit of a minefield, right? Because you want to maintain your creative control or vision or whatever without just changing things for everybody's sake, but at the same time you don't want to be locked down and don't take criticism on board. You don't want to be precious with it, basically. So I think what I decided ultimately with stuff like that is that if any sentiment was repeated by more than one tester, I would say that is a valid concern, and if not, I would have to take things with a pinch of salt and go, I think it was fine how it was, which maybe is a bit arrogant, but such is the nature of like making something by yourself, I guess. Overall though, everything was super positive. Like, people were really nice. The testers all said that the game was like funny, it made them laugh, which is kind of my main aim, and that they enjoyed the ending and that the plot came together well. So I was just really ecstatic with how that whole thing went, and everybody kind of settled on the fact that it was about a 4-hour game, which is actually a bit less than I thought. These things are very hard to judge because you don't know how long puzzles take to solve, and when you are racing through a game because you know how everything works, you've no idea how long it takes. And I think as a middle-aged man with not a lot of time, 4 hours is fine for this kind of thing.
4 hours?
And I guess, thinking about it, that's a pretty major milestone to have hit, right? People have tested my game, they can play it all the way through, it works, and they liked it, broadly. So where the hell do you go from there? I guess you've got to release the thing. Because most of the bugs were very small, it really took me a day maximum kind of to work through the list in the spreadsheet and fix everything. And then you have effectively what I guess they call gold versions of your game, where I know it works on PC and I know it works on Mac because there was a split of people playing the game, and yeah, that's a thing you can like commit to disk if it was an era in which that still happened. But the big elephant in the room here is iOS. I've always wanted to release this game onto phones because I have played point and click games through on both my phone and my iPad in the past. I think I've said in this channel before, I think iPads especially are great for this genre of game. If you've got an iPad and a point and click game, you're good for any long haul flight that you want to go on. And you may be sitting there thinking, well, what about Android? Which is a fair question, but I want to show you this chart from, again, Tom Hardridge, who made Lucy Dreaming, about the sales by platform breakdown, and just say, look at how small the Android slice of this pie is. Now, I had a chat with Tom about this a while ago, and he was saying not only is the relative kind of sales pie slice for Android very small, but he found it to be a real pain in the arse because there are so many different devices running so many different software versions for Android that he said he just had a litany of like reviews saying, oh, this doesn't run on my Huawei Gigablock 4 or whatever. And that's a world that I don't want to get into because I'm already way out of my depth as it is. So for the sake of not losing my marbles, we're going to stick to iOS, because if you don't have an iPhone, you probably have an iPad. Like, let's be real. So yeah, building for iOS. The process here was to make a whole duplicate of my project, call it iOS build, and then go in and change some of the key settings straight away. So tell Adventure Creator this is now touchscreen, remove the cursor because we don't need that, change the inventory to be drag and drop because the sort of click and move mouse stuff didn't work on touch, and then a bunch of other quality of life stuff, like on the PC Mac build you can hold spacebar to reveal all the hotspots. Obviously you don't have a spacebar on a phone, so I've just created a menu and told that menu that it simulates spacebar input, so when you tap that it shows the hotspots, and yeah, just various other little tweaks that make it more touch friendly. That is all the easy stuff. The hard part is like getting it onto a phone to test it out. So if you want to put a game onto iOS, you're going to need a Mac, you're going to need to download Xcode, which is massive, it's like 10 gig with all the bits and bobs. Then you're going to need an Apple developer account, which is $100 a year. Make of that what you will. I'm not going to get into the weird politics of like the way Apple takes its money from you.
The rest is just bean counting for the breadheads, yeah?
But also, to set up a developer account, you need a business email address if you want to do it as a company like I am. So before you even get to that point, you need to sign up for some sort of business work account. So that's cost me like $8 a month with Google Workspace now as well. And then you're finally ready to start making a build for Xcode. So what you're going to do is go into the build settings of Unity, change platform to iOS, assuming you've downloaded that module. This will take about an hour because it will like recompile everything into whatever formats work for a phone. I don't know what I'm talking about. Then you can say build and run, Xcode will open, and it will show you a million errors and say everything's broken and you can't do this. Most of those errors will be yellow and you can ignore them. You will have definitely one red error, which is about signing. Now for testing, you can go here, say handle that automatically, choose yourself, and that will make that error go away. So another thing you might have to do is go into build settings, scroll down to here, find where it says Mono Thumb, open it, remove Mono Thumb, and then you can send your game to your phone. Now you might be wondering what the hell is that and why is that the case? I wish I could tell you. All I know is it wasn't working. I did a lot of googling. I ended up in some weird forum, and halfway down the forum someone had said, oh yeah, what you got to do is just get rid of this Mono Thumb thing. Now I'm not a developer, but what are you talking about? Why is that the answer to a problem that I don't even understand? Like, this is why this stuff is so impenetrable to people. Like, what does that mean? What is Mono Thumb? Why was it there? Why do I have to get rid of it? What's going on? Yeah, very strange. But if you get rid of that and you do the automatic signing, you can send it to your phone. The only thing you have to do other than that is to go into the settings of your iOS device, turn on developer mode, it will restart, then you can send it, and then when you go to open the app, you have to go into settings, general, VPN and other management, and trust yourself. And then you have an app on your phone which will be there for about 72 hours before it says you can't open it anymore. So that's enough time to test. And so yeah, I put my game on my phone and lo and behold, it worked. And then the problem started. So I found in a drawer an old iOS 6S, which if you don't know, or if you're not up to date with phones, is a 10-year-old phone. And I thought, great, if it works on this, it will work on pretty much anything. And I then proceeded to fall down a rabbit hole that lasted a full-on week of trying to get my game to run on this stupid old phone for some reason. If you're thinking, hang on, you're making a 2D point and click game, why is that hard? It's a good question. The answer is lots and lots of high resolution art and very tight RAM limits on old phones. So the iPhone 6S has 2 gig of RAM. Playable RAM, as in like not being used by system, is less than that. It's probably like 1 point something. And whereas with a PC, when it hits like its RAM threshold, things just bottleneck and slow down a bit. On iOS, the app just quits. So what I was finding was the title screen on my phone would crash the app because there's lots of high-res art all loading at once and logic and, you know, menus and stuff, which isn't great. Ultimately though, I found salvation in the form of ChatGPT. Now this is going to be controversial because I know people have very strong opinions on AI and how it's going to take all our jobs and kill the world, and I don't disagree because I'm a professional writer by trade. But what I will say is, whereas Google will send you into weird forums, I ended up having like day-long chats with ChatGPT about this issue, where it was able to effectively write scripts that became tools within Unity to shrink assets, and that's something I just wouldn't be able to do by myself, and it's something that would have cost me some money to figure out otherwise. So this was kind of game changing in a way. And so what it would do would be like, oh yeah, what's probably crashing it is the RAM limit, it's probably these assets. I've written you a script that can go in and make all of the assets that are being rendered at 2048-1024. That's half the size. It will save you some RAM. Add this script here, run it, it will do that. Great, did that, and it did work on the phone, but then everything looked a bit crap. So then I just went back and forth with it for ages, finessing these scripts where it'd be like, okay, ignore characters and ignore anything with the word backdrop in the file name. Here's a script that will do that, and it did that. And it was kind of fascinating that we're at that stage that that's a thing I can do. So at one point I asked ChatGPT to draw a picture of me and it solving this problem. This is what it came up with. 2D point and click game. There's ChatGPT. There's my memory usage chart. I've got a dog, which clearly isn't the case. And another dog with a cable coming out of its mouth. But yeah, genuinely really helpful, and ultimately got to a point where on my creaky old iPhone 6S the game would run, except when I got to the end and the game had to load a video and then it crashed. So bear in mind at this point I'd probably spent about a week obsessing about getting this stupid build to run on this stupid old phone.
I'm not smart.
Then I took a step back and I was like, hang on, is anybody who plays games going to be using an iPhone 6S? And I found out a couple of things. Firstly, that 2GB RAM limit is quite an old concept, in as much as the iPhones moved to at least 3GB of RAM around the iPhone XR, I think it was, or X. Or 10, so that's 5 years ago, and a 5-year-old phone is pretty old, but that extra gig of RAM is enough to make this a workable situation, right? Secondly, when you make an iOS build in Unity and Xcode, you can choose a minimum viable iOS version, and by default I think that's set to iOS 12, but right now we're on iOS 18, and if you Google like the percentage of people that are on which version of iOS, you will find that 95% of all iOS users are on iOS 17 or 18, because generally the phones are quite good at forcing you to upgrade. Now that means that if I continue to obsess about this 10-year-old phone, I'm doing it for the benefit of 5% of iOS users, of which probably nobody's going to use that device for playing new games. So after a long time of mucking around doing nothing, I realised I've been wasting my time. Set the hard limit to iOS 17, and then you are still going back to devices like iPads from 5 years ago and phones from 5 years ago, but they have enough RAM to run this game without any issues, and I'm going to get no bad reviews on the basis of the app crashing on somebody's really old stupid phone. And I suggest that if you're making an iOS game, you do the same, because otherwise you're just hamstringing yourself for no reason. So yeah, ultimately, out the back of all that, I've got a build that works on most phones and iPads, and I've got a gold build on PC and Mac, and I have a game that's therefore done. You know, like no more tinkering, no more editing. The game is a game, and if I die, someone can release it for me. And so that's where we're at. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the video, there is a demo in the works. It's actually uploaded to Steam and sitting ready, and it will come out on the 20th of May if you want to put that in your calendars. But I will be back ahead of that with another video to talk about the process of making a demo and Next Fest related stuff. And then I will do another video about how Next Fest went. And then, do you know what? We're probably going to release this computer game. So thanks for watching, and goodbye.